Never let your family make decisions about your apartment when they show up unannounced. What I'm about to tell you will completely change how you think about family boundaries, and trust me, you're not going to believe what happened when my parents tried to give away my home without asking. My name is Emma Thompson, and I'm 27 years old. I work as a marketing coordinator for a tech startup in downtown Seattle. And after years of saving every penny, I finally bought my own one-bedroom apartment last spring. It wasn't much, 800 square feet on the third floor of a converted brick building, but it was mine. The mortgage papers had my name on them. I picked out every piece of furniture, and for the first time in my life, I had a space where I could breathe without someone telling me what I was doing wrong. But my family, they never quite got that memo. It was a Tuesday evening in October when everything started falling apart. Mum had called that morning with her usual cheerful manipulation. "Emma, sweetie, we're having family dinner tonight. 6 o'clock. Don't be late." Not, "Would you like to come?" or "Are you free?" Just the assumption that I would drop everything and show up like I always did. I should have known something was up when I walked into my childhood home and saw my sister Sarah sitting at the dining room table with red-rimmed eyes and a pile of tissues. Sarah is 24, 3 years younger than me, and she's always been what you might call the golden child. Where I was the responsible one who got average grades and worked part-time jobs through college, Sarah was the artistic one who got into prestigious art school on a partial scholarship and spent 4 years finding herself while Mum and Dad covered the rest of her expenses. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but watching your parents bend over backwards for one child while treating the other like an afterthought does something to you over time. It creates this weird dynamic where you're simultaneously protective of your sibling and resentful of the inequality you've lived with your entire life. "Emma's here," Mom announced as I hung my coat in the hallway. Perfect timing. We were just about to start dinner. Dad was already seated at the head of the table, scrolling through his phone with that expression he gets when he's trying to solve everyone's problems at once. He barely looked up when I sat down, just grunted a hello and kept typing. Mom bustled around the kitchen, bringing out her famous meatloaf and mashed potatoes. The same meal she'd been making for family dinners since I was in elementary school. "So," Mum said as she finally sat down, "we need to talk about Sarah's situation." Here we go, I thought. Sarah's situation was always something that required family discussion, family input, family sacrifice. When Sarah needed money for art supplies, it was a family decision to help. When Sarah's college roommate was being toxic, it was a family decision to let her move back home junior year. When Sarah decided to change her major from graphic design to fine arts, extending her graduation by a year, it was a family decision to support her dreams. "What's going on?" I asked, even though I could already feel the familiar knot forming in my stomach. Sarah sniffled and looked at Mom, who reached over and squeezed her hand. "Well, you know, Sarah graduated in May and she's been applying for jobs in her field. It's just, the art market is so competitive right now. And she hasn't found anything that pays enough to cover rent and student loans." I nodded, cutting into my meatloaf. "That's tough. Have you looked into anything outside of art? Just temporarily, until something better comes along?" Sarah's face crumpled. "I didn't spend 4 years studying fine arts to work at Target, Emma." I worked at Target, I pointed out, all through college. It's honest work. That's different, Mum said quickly. You were always more practical. Sarah is an artist. She needs to focus on her craft. Dad finally put down his phone. The point is, Sarah needs a place to stay while she gets on her feet. Somewhere affordable where she can concentrate on her art and job search without the pressure of high rent. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Okay. Your apartment would be perfect, Mum continued, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. You have that nice couch that pulls out into a bed, and the neighbourhood is so convenient for getting to galleries and coffee shops where she can network. I stopped chewing. Excuse me? Just temporarily, Dad added. Maybe 6 months until she finds something stable. I looked around the table at 3 expectant faces and realised they had already decided. This wasn't a discussion or a request. This was them informing me of the plan they'd made for my life and my space without bothering to include me in the conversation. You're saying you want Sarah to move into my apartment, I said slowly. Live with you, Mum corrected. It would be like having a roommate, except it's family, so it's even better. I don't want a roommate, I said. That's why I got a 1-bedroom apartment. Sarah looked up from her tissues. I wouldn't be any trouble, Em. I'd help with cleaning and maybe I could cook sometimes. You know how good my pasta is. Your sister will live in your apartment, Dad said, with that tone he used when he considered the matter settled. It's the right thing to do. Family helps family. I just let them talk. That's what I always did in these situations. I sat there quietly while they made plans for my life, while they decided how my resources should be allocated, while they figured out how to solve Sarah's problems using my space, my peace of mind, my carefully constructed independence. I had learned a long time ago that arguing only made things worse. It made me the selfish one, the difficult one, the one who didn't understand what family meant. So I finished my meatloaf in silence while they discussed logistics. Sarah would move in the following weekend. She'd sleep on the pull-out couch and use the hall closet for her clothes. Maybe she could set up an easel by the big window for her painting. It would be such a blessing to give her this opportunity to pursue her dreams without the stress of rent hanging over her head. This is so generous of you, Emma, Mum said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. I knew we could count on you to do the right thing. I smiled and nodded because that's what I always did. But inside, something was shifting. A quiet voice in the back of my head was saying, they didn't ask, they just decided. After dinner, I helped Mum clear the table while Sarah and Dad discussed her timeline for moving. She was planning to quit her part-time job at the campus bookstore. Because why work when you could focus full-time on art? And she'd already started packing her things from her dorm room. You're being so understanding about this, Mum said as we loaded the dishwasher. I know it's an adjustment, but Sarah really needs this right now. And honestly, it might be good for you too. You spend too much time alone in that apartment. It's not healthy for a young woman to be so isolated. There it was. The subtle implication that my choice to live alone was somehow wrong. That my desire for independence was a character flaw that needed correcting. because God forbid I actually enjoy having my own space, my own routine, my own life that didn't revolve around solving other people's problems. When exactly is she planning to move in? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. This Saturday, Dad's going to rent a U-Haul to help with her bigger pieces. She has this gorgeous abstract painting series that she's hoping to show to some gallery owners, and they'll need proper space to be displayed. Saturday, 4 days from now. They'd given me 4 days' notice that my living situation was about to change completely. I drove home that night with my hands gripping the steering wheel and my mind racing. Part of me wanted to call them and say, no, absolutely not, find another solution. But I knew how that conversation would go. I'd be the selfish sister who couldn't help family in need. I'd be the one causing drama and making things difficult. I'd be the problem. My apartment felt like a sanctuary when I walked through the door. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. My books arranged by colour on the shelves, my favourite throw blanket folded over the back of the couch, my coffee mug still sitting on the kitchen counter from that morning. This was my space, the first space that had ever truly belonged to me. And they wanted to give it away like it was nothing. I sat on my couch, the couch that was apparently going to become Sarah's bed, and stared at the wall. 27 years of being the responsible one, the helpful one, the one who quietly went along with whatever the family needed. 27 years of my needs coming second, my boundaries being treated as suggestions, my voice being drowned out by louder, more dramatic personalities. But something was different this time. Maybe it was having my own mortgage, my own lease, my own legal claim to this space. Maybe it was finally being old enough to recognise the pattern I'd been stuck in my entire life. Or maybe I was just tired of being treated like a supporting character in my own story. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus Chen's number. Marcus had been my study partner in college. We'd spent countless hours in the library, working through marketing case studies and cramming for finals. After graduation, he'd moved to Portland for a job at a non-profit, but I knew he'd been thinking about relocating to Seattle for better opportunities. Emma, Marcus answered on the second ring. What a surprise. How are you? Hey Marcus, I know this is random, but are you still thinking about moving to Seattle? Actually, yeah, I'd been looking at apartments online, but the rent prices are insane. Why? I took a deep breath. How would you feel about a really short-term sublet, like starting this weekend? Seriously? What's the situation? I found myself explaining the whole thing, the family dinner, the assumption, the complete lack of consultation about my own living space. Marcus listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a moment. So they just decided your sister was moving in with you? Basically, yeah. And they didn't ask your opinion? They informed me of the decision they'd already made. Marcus laughed, but not in a mean way. Emma, that's completely insane. You know that, right? Hearing someone else say it, someone outside the family dynamic who could see the situation clearly, was like a light switch flipping on. I'm starting to realize that. Look, I could definitely use a place to crash while I apartment hunt. I was planning to stay in hostels or Airbnbs for the first couple weeks. But if you're serious about this, I'm serious. How quickly could you get here? I could drive up Thursday night, be there Friday morning, but Emma, are you sure about this? I don't want to cause family drama. I looked around my apartment again, my sanctuary, my first real home, the place I'd worked so hard to afford. Marcus. They're planning to show up Saturday morning with a U-Haul truck full of Sarah's stuff. They're counting on me being too polite to say no, too well trained to cause a scene. And instead, I'll be there to answer the door. Exactly. Marcus was quiet for another moment. This is either brilliant or completely crazy. Maybe both, I admitted, but I'm tired of being the family doormat. I'm tired of having decisions made for me about my own life. And I'm definitely tired of being expected to sacrifice my peace of mind because someone else didn't plan ahead. All right then. Consider me your temporary roommate and unwitting accomplice. This is going to be interesting. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years when it came to family situations, control. For once, I wasn't just reacting to their plans, I was making my own. For once, I wasn't going to smile and nod and accommodate everyone else's needs at the expense of my own. I spent the next 2 days acting completely normal. When Mum called to ask if I needed help preparing the apartment for Sarah's arrival, I said everything was under control. When Sarah texted to ask about internet passwords and whether I had a coffee maker, I responded helpfully. When Dad asked if Saturday morning around 10 would work for the move-in, I said that sounded fine. I wasn't lying exactly. Everything was under control, just not in the way they expected. Marcus arrived Friday evening with a duffel bag and a grin. I can't believe we're doing this, he said as I let him into the apartment. I can't believe it took me this long to stand up for myself, I replied. The guest bedding is in the hall closet. Make yourself at home. What time did you say they're coming tomorrow? 10 a.m. They'll probably be here at 9:30 because Dad always arrives early for everything. Marcus nodded and looked around the apartment. Nice place, by the way. I can see why you don't want to give it up. It's not even about the apartment, really, I said, settling onto the couch. It's about the fact that they didn't ask. They just assumed I'd go along with whatever they decided. Like I always do. And now? I smiled. Now they're going to learn that assumptions can be dangerous. Friday night, I barely slept. Part of me was nervous about the confrontation that was coming, but a bigger part of me felt more energized than I had in months. For the first time in my adult life, I was setting a boundary with my family. Not just thinking about it, not just wishing I could, but actually doing it. Marcus was up early Saturday morning, making coffee and acting like he'd lived in my apartment for years instead of hours. You sure you're ready for this? He asked as I joined him in the kitchen. I'm ready, I said, and I meant it. At exactly 9:28, we heard footsteps on the stairs outside my door. Heavy footsteps, multiple people, and the sound of something being dragged. The U-Haul had arrived. Marcus and I looked at each other. Showtime, he said. The knock came 30 seconds later. 3 sharp raps, followed by my mother's voice. Emma, we're here. I nodded at Marcus and stepped back into the bedroom, leaving the door cracked so I could hear everything. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in years, it wasn't from anxiety about disappointing my family. It was from excitement about finally standing up for myself. Marcus walked to the front door and opened it with a casual smile. "Good morning," he said. "Can I help you?" The silence that followed Marcus's greeting stretched for what felt like forever. I could hear it through the bedroom door, that particular kind of stunned quiet that happens when people's brains are trying to process something that doesn't match their expectations. "I'm sorry," Mum's voice finally came, higher pitched than usual. "I think we have the wrong apartment. We're looking for Emma Thompson." "This is Emma's place," Marcus replied casually. "I'm Marcus, her roommate. Are you here about something?" My father's voice cut in, sharper now. "Roommate? What roommate? Emma doesn't have a roommate." "Well, I've been living here since yesterday, so I'd say she does now," Marcus said, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from knowing you're completely in the right. "Can I ask who you are?" "We're her parents," Mum said, and I could hear the confusion turning to irritation. "And this is her sister Sarah. We're here to help Sarah move in." There was another pause, and I pictured Marcus's face, probably wearing that politely confused expression he used to get when professors asked him questions about readings he hadn't done. "Move in where?" he asked. "Here," Dad said, his voice getting louder. "Into this apartment. We discussed this with Emma on Tuesday." "Huh?" Marcus said thoughtfully. "That's weird because Emma definitely didn't mention anything about someone moving in. In fact, she specifically mentioned wanting to keep it just the two of us for now." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound. This was better than I'd even imagined. Marcus wasn't just answering the door, he was actively making them question their assumptions while staying completely truthful. "This is ridiculous," Sarah's voice joined the conversation, shakier than the others. "Emma, we know you're in there. What's going on?" That was my cue. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and walked out of the bedroom with the most genuinely confused expression I could manage. "Oh, hey everyone," I said, like I was surprised to see them. "What are you all doing here?" The scene in my doorway was exactly what I'd hoped for. Dad was standing behind a dolly loaded with boxes, looking like someone had just told him the sky was green. Mum was clutching her purse with white knuckles, her carefully planned morning clearly derailed. And Sarah, poor Sarah, was standing next to a suitcase and what looked like an easel, her face already crumpling with the realization that something had gone very wrong. "Emma," Mum said slowly, "what is this man doing in your apartment?" "This man is Marcus," I said, gesturing to him with a smile. "My roommate. I thought I mentioned him." "You absolutely did not mention him," Dad said through gritted teeth. "Really? Huh. Well, anyway, Marcus, these are my parents, Janet and Robert Thompson. And that's my sister, Sarah." Marcus stepped forward and extended his hand like this was a perfectly normal social introduction. "Nice to meet you all. Emma's told me so much about her family." Nobody shook his hand. "Emma," Sarah said, and her voice was getting that trembling quality it always got when she was about to cry. "What about our plan? You said I could move in today." I tilted my head, genuinely confused. "I said you could move in. When did I say that?" "Tuesday night, at dinner. We all discussed it." "Oh," I said, understanding dawning on my face. "I think there might have been a misunderstanding. You all discussed it. I just sat there and listened." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as the three of them processed what I'd just said, watched as they realized that their assumption that my silence meant agreement had just blown up spectacularly in their faces. "But you didn't say no," Mom said weakly. "I also didn't say yes," I replied. Actually, I don't remember anyone asking for my opinion at all. Dad's face was starting to turn red, which was never a good sign. "Emma, don't be ridiculous. Of course we were asking for your opinion. It was a family discussion." "No, Dad, it was a family announcement. There's a difference." I kept my voice calm and level, the way I'd practiced in my head. "You told me that Sarah was going to live in my apartment. You didn't ask if that was okay with me. You didn't ask if I wanted a roommate. You just informed me of the decision you'd already made." Marcus was watching this exchange with fascination, and I could see a couple of my neighbours peeking out their doors to see what all the commotion was about. The U-Haul truck was blocking half the street, and we were definitely providing the morning entertainment for the entire building. "This is insane," Sarah burst out. "You're being completely selfish. I need a place to stay." "And you'll find one," I said calmly. "Just not here." "But where am I supposed to go? I quit my job. I packed all my stuff." That was the moment when I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, but a kind of crystalline clarity about the pattern we'd been stuck in for years. Sarah's crisis was immediately everyone's responsibility. Sarah's poor planning became everyone's problem to solve. And somehow I was always the one expected to sacrifice the most to fix it. "Sarah," I said gently, "why did you quit your job before you had somewhere to live?" "Because I thought I was moving in here." "But you never confirmed that with me. You just assumed." Mum stepped forward, her face flushed. "Emma, this is your sister. Family helps family." "You're absolutely right," I agreed. "Family does help family. But help doesn't mean automatically sacrificing everything the other person needs. Help means having a conversation. Help means asking, not assuming." I gestured toward the U-Haul. "This isn't help, Mom. This is you deciding that my space, my home, my boundaries don't matter as long as Sarah's problem gets solved." "Your boundaries?" Dad's voice was incredulous. "Since when do you have boundaries with family?" "Since I realised that having boundaries doesn't make me a bad person," I replied. "It makes me a person." Marcus cleared his throat gently. "I hate to interrupt, but there are people trying to get past the truck, and I think Mrs. Patterson from 2B is getting ready to call the building manager." He was right. The scene we were creating was starting to draw serious attention, and not the good kind. Dad looked around and seemed to realise for the first time that we were having this entire argument in public, with Sarah's belongings spread across the hallway and a U-Haul blocking traffic. "Fine," he said, his jaw tight. "We'll take this somewhere private. Emma, get your things. We're going back to the house to sort this out properly." "No, thank you," I said pleasantly. "Excuse me?" "I said no, thank you. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home and I'm staying here." "Emma Elizabeth Thompson," Mum said, using the full name she only pulled out for serious occasions. "You are being unbelievably selfish right now." "Am I?" I asked. "Or am I finally being honest about what I want and what I'm willing to do?" Sarah was crying openly now, standing next to her suitcase like a lost child. And despite everything, despite my anger and frustration and years of resentment, I felt pang of sympathy for her. She genuinely hadn't understood that this plan might not work. She'd been raised in the same system I had, where Emma's compliance was just assumed. "Look," I said, my voice softening slightly, Sarah, I'm not trying to hurt you, but I bought this apartment because I wanted to live alone. I saved for years to have my own space. I'm not ready to give that up. But it's just temporary," she said through her tears. "You said 6 months minimum. That's not temporary. That's half a year of my life. I can't afford anything else." "Then maybe you shouldn't have quit your job before you had a plan." The words came out harsher than I intended, but they were true. Sarah had quit her job because she assumed I would take care of her housing situation. She'd made a major life decision based on the expectation that I would accommodate whatever she needed, without ever checking to see if that expectation was realistic. Dad was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. "I don't know what's gotten into you, Emma, but this isn't the daughter we raised." "Maybe that's the problem," I said quietly. "Maybe the daughter you raised was too afraid to speak up for herself." The hallway fell silent again. Marcus shifted uncomfortably beside me, probably wondering if he'd signed up for more family drama than he'd bargained for. Mrs. Patterson had indeed come out of her apartment and was standing there with her arms crossed, glaring at the U-Haul like it had personally offended her. "We should probably move this conversation away from the hallway," I said finally. "Marcus, would you mind giving us a few minutes?" "Of course," he said, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. "I'll go grab some coffee and be back in a bit." He squeezed past my family with an apologetic smile and disappeared down the stairs. I stepped back and gestured for them to come into the apartment that Sarah had already been planning to reorganize to accommodate her art supplies. Once the door was closed, the dynamic shifted again. Without the audience of neighbours and strangers, we were just a family, having the fight we'd been building up to for years. "Emma," Mum started, sitting down heavily on my couch. "I don't understand what's happening here. You've always been so reasonable." "I've always been quiet," I corrected. "There's a difference." Dad was pacing my small living room like a caged animal. "So what? You're just going to let your sister be homeless?" "Sarah isn't going to be homeless, Dad. She has options. She can stay with you and Mom while she looks for a place. She can find roommates her own age. She can get her job back and save up for a deposit somewhere." "But this would be so much easier for her." "Easier for her, yes. But what about what's easier for me?" Sarah was sitting next to Mom now, still crying, but more quietly. I thought you'd want to help me." "I do want to help you," I said, sitting down across from them. "But helping you doesn't have to mean giving up my own space and peace of mind." "So how are you going to help then?" Dad demanded. I'd been thinking about this ever since I'd made the plan with Marcus. "I can help you look for apartments. I can write a reference letter for rental applications. I can even lend you money for a deposit if you need it, but I can't give you my home." "A reference letter?" Dad's voice was incredulous. "Sarah needs a place to live, not paperwork." "Sarah needs to learn how to solve her own problems," I said, and the words felt revolutionary coming out of my mouth. "She needs to learn that other people aren't automatically responsible for fixing her mistakes." Mum gasped like I just suggested we abandon Sarah in the wilderness. "Emma, that's a terrible thing to say about your sister." "Is it?" Sarah quit her job without having a backup plan. Sarah assumed she could move in here without actually asking me. Sarah is 24 years old and she's never had to figure out her own housing situation because there's always been someone else to take care of it for her. I looked directly at Sarah as I continued. I'm not saying this to be mean. I'm saying it because I love you enough to think you're capable of taking care of yourself. And Sarah's crying had stopped, and she was looking at me with something that might have been confusion or might have been the beginning of understanding. But what if I can't find anywhere affordable, she asked. Then you'll figure out how to make more money or spend less money or find creative solutions, I said. The same way everyone else does. Everyone else doesn't have a sister with a spare apartment, Dad pointed out. I don't have a spare apartment, Dad. I have my apartment. The one I live in. The one I specifically bought because it was the right size for one person. The argument continued for another hour, cycling through the same points over and over. They couldn't understand why I wouldn't just help family. I couldn't understand why helping had to mean sacrificing my own needs. They saw my refusal as selfishness. I saw their expectation as presumptuous. Finally, Mum stood up with a sigh. I think we should go home and discuss this as a family. I am discussing it as a family, I said, right here, right now. Without you, Dad clarified coldly. The threat was implicit but clear. They were going to go home and decide how to handle me. They were going to figure out how to get me back in line, how to make me compliant again, how to restore the family dynamic where Emma quietly went along with whatever everyone else needed. That's fine, I said, standing up as well. You're welcome to have whatever conversations you want. But my answer isn't going to change. Sarah finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. So that's it? You're just done with us? The question hit harder than I'd expected. I'm not done with you, Sarah. I'm done with being expected to solve your problems without being asked if I'm willing or able to do that. It's the same thing. No, it's really not. They left without saying goodbye, Dad loading Sarah's boxes back into the U-Haul with sharp, angry movements. I watched from my window as they drove away, the truck disappearing around the corner like a retreat from a battle that hadn't gone according to plan. Marcus returned 20 minutes later with coffee and donuts, taking one look at my face and setting the bag down on the counter. How did it go? He asked. About as well as expected, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. They think I'm being selfish. I think I'm finally being honest. We're at an impasse. Do you think they'll come around? I considered the question seriously. I think they'll try to find ways to change my mind. They'll probably get other family members involved. My grandmother, my Aunt Carol, maybe some of Sarah's friends. They'll want to show me how unreasonable I'm being. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, for the first time in my life, I don't really care what they think about my decision. It feels liberating. Marcus smiled. Good for you. And hey, if you need a real roommate while this all blows over, my apartment search can wait a few weeks. Thanks, I said. But I think I need to prove to myself that I can handle this on my own. You already are handling it. He was right. I was handling it. For 27 years, I'd been the daughter who said yes, the sister who accommodated, the family member who could always be counted on to put everyone else's needs first. But sitting in my apartment with my furniture and my rules and my boundaries, I realised I'd been handling a lot more than I'd given myself credit for. The phone started ringing around noon, first my grandmother, then my Aunt Carol, then Sarah's best friend from college. Word had spread through the family network with the speed and efficiency of a military communication system. And the message was clear. Emma had lost her mind and needed to be talked back to reality. I let them all go to voicemail. By evening, I had 14 missed calls and 23 text messages, all variations on the same theme. How could I be so selfish? Didn't I understand what family meant? Wasn't I worried about Sarah's future? What would people think? That last one almost made me laugh. What would people think? People would think that a woman in her 20s had chosen not to let her sister move into her one-bedroom apartment. People would think that was completely normal. It was only my family who thought it was scandalous. Marcus ordered pizza for dinner and we ate it while watching Netflix like we were just two regular roommates having a normal Saturday night. Which, in a way, we were. The crisis had passed, the family had retreated, and life was continuing exactly as I'd chosen it to continue. You know, Marcus said as we finished off the last of the pizza, I've been thinking about what your dad said earlier, about boundaries with family. What about it? He seemed genuinely shocked that you would have boundaries with them at all. Like the concept was completely foreign. I nodded. That's because it is. In my family, boundaries are seen as rejection. If you're not willing to do whatever someone needs, you must not love them enough. That's Marcus paused, looking for the right words. That's not healthy. No, I agreed. It's not. So what happens now? I curled up in the corner of my couch in my apartment, in my life that I was finally taking control of. Now I learn how to be okay with them being disappointed in me. I learn how to live with their disapproval. And hopefully, eventually, I learn how to have a relationship with them that doesn't require me to disappear. It sounded scary when I said it out loud, but it also sounded like freedom. Outside my window, Seattle was settling into Saturday night. Cars drove past carrying people to dinners and movies and dates. Neighbours were coming home with grocery bags and takeout containers. The world was continuing to turn, completely indifferent to the fact that I'd just upended my entire family dynamic. And for the first time in my adult life, that felt exactly right.